Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British road journey. This week I'm visiting the county of Rutland. Hang on. Rutland is a county in the East Midlands of England. It's bordered by Lincolnshire, Leicestershire and Northamptonshire, and other than the city of London at 151 square miles, it's the smallest county in the United Kingdom. It sure is, friends. The population across the entire county adds up to around 42,000, which is bugger all when compared to, for example, the city of Leicester, which we looked at last week with its population of over 560,000. Our journey today, which I suspect will be short, takes us through Rutland, starting in Uppingham and ending in a place called Stretton. As always, to help navigate our way there, we'll be using a copy of my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps. And has anyone actually been to Rutland before? I haven't. What's the point? Maybe my guidebook holds the answer. It says that Uppingham is a small village with a population of around 2,500. Today that figure has increased massively to around 4,900. My guidebook suggests that we might like to visit Uppingham School, which is fair enough because the architecture is unique and quite interesting, but it's still open and operates as a private boarding school, so with that in mind, we won't be visiting the school. However, the school is relevant to our next item because without it, it's unlikely to have been built. On the east side of Uppingham lies an abandoned railway viaduct which used to be part of the 4-mile-long single-track Uppingham branch line. It opened in 1894 and it was built because the railway company wanted to cash in on transporting students to and from the school as well as transport freight from the nearby ironstone mines. Whilst the school did sign a contract to run a few special trains, the line never got as busy as intended, and such was the school's influence on the town, they managed to block the expansion of the ironstone mines, leading to a lot less freight to be transported. Furthermore, local residents opted to travel the short distance to Manton railway station, which is the far better connected railway station. Or at least it was. Like the Uppingham branch line, it closed in the 1960s, although unlike the branch line, the railway at Manton still exists and runs underneath the entire village via a tunnel. Just to the north of Manton is the A6003, which, according to our old maps, used to run parallel to the railway in this location, but it would appear that that's no longer the case. This means that there's now a stretch of abandoned road for us to explore, and I'm going to be on the lookout for an old road bridge. I don't know if it still exists or not, but we are going to go find out. I can see some sort of solid structure hiding in the bushes. I will move up for closer investigation. Well, there definitely is a road bridge here, although it's very difficult to spot through all of the overgrown bushes. The reason the bridge was built was to carry the road over the River Gwash, which in the days of my guidebook was nothing more than a river running through Rutland, and indeed it still is, but in the 1970s a new feature was added to the river. It's known as Rutland Water, and it's a massive person-made reservoir and is probably the only claim to fame Rutland has. You'd think, being such a small county, you wouldn't want to lose any more land, but apparently not, and with a surface area of 4.2 square miles, Rutland Water is the largest reservoir in England. It was built by damming the River Gwash and allowing the river valley to flood, which led to the loss of a few houses, in particular the hamlet of Nether Hambleton. It also meant the loss of what was, at the time, the A606. The road connecting Oakham to Barnsdale ended up underwater, so the A606 had to be rebuilt along a new alignment. Up next is the town of Oakham, the largest in the county, with a population of around 12,000, and my guidebook suggests that we might like to visit Oakham Castle and Grammar School. Starting with the castle, but there isn't one. But there was, sort of. Oakham Castle wasn't like your typical castles with towers and whatnot. It was a large walled structure on top of an embankment within which were several separate buildings. It may be better described as a large fortified manor house, and it was built in the 1180s by Michelin de Ferriers. I don't know, but at the time, he was lord of the Oakham Manor, meaning he could do whatever he wanted. Today, not much of the castle or manor house remains, apart from the embankment that it was built on, and one single building which you can see behind me, known as the Great Hall. On to Oakham Grammar School, and it's found just outside of the castle walls. It was built a bit later, though, in the 1580s, by a guy called Robert Johnson, who was a Church of England cleric. He wanted to provide education for children who couldn't afford to attend some of the more regular schools, and interestingly, Johnson would also set up Uppingham School, the same private boarding school that we avoided earlier. Despite this building being well over 400 years old, it's still used for educational purposes today. Moving on from Oakham, and we'll be heading down the A606, which, if you recall, was realigned and rebuilt following the construction of Rutland Water. The plan is to head north towards Cottesmore, but before we do that, I'm going to drive completely the wrong way to look at something interesting. We might as well. Situated to the north of Stretton village is a large cement works and quarry. The cement works was established in 1921 and initially was nothing more than a simple concrete block factory. Then in 1933 a second kiln was added, a third in 1939 and then a fourth in 1954, resulting in an output of over 300,000 tonnes of cement a year. A unique feature of the cement works is its 100-metre high concrete chimney stack, which was a new idea when it was built in the late 1930s. Until that point, most structures of this type had been constructed out of brick. In the 1960s, with a lot of new town redevelopment happening across the country, demand for cement was at an all-time high, leading to further expansion of the site, and by the 1970s it was producing over 700,000 tonnes of cement a year. Fun fact, last week we looked at Leicester's clock tower, and the clock tower is made out of stone quarried from this very place. That expansion must have continued because in more recent times, Uppingham Road, found to the southwest of the site, was rebuilt along a new alignment because they wanted to dig up the land. But as part of the new road, they built a bridge which takes the road over an awesome looking canyon of sorts. Well, that was fun. We've got to head back on ourselves now in order to pick up the route I had in mind, so we'll head along the A606 and do a right onto Barnsdale Avenue, which will take us into Cottesmore, which has two interesting things. Neither of which are in the village itself, but instead found just outside, and we start with the Rocks by Rail Living Ironstone Museum. It's a small industrial railway that's run by a group of volunteers, and what I find interesting is that the site originally was a railway that was later removed completely, leaving little to no trace, but the volunteers brought back the railway, building what we see today pretty much from scratch. The site was purchased in 1979 and they didn't hang about. The first steam locomotive ran on the newly built railway in 1980 and was known as HL 3865 Singapore. This engine was built in 1936 and in 1942 it got caught up in a battle known as the Fall of Singapore during the Second Small Disagreement. The engine suffered shrapnel and bullet damage, which you can still see today, along with a host of other exciting exhibits. The next interesting thing in Cottesmore, but not in Cottesmore, is the site of the former RAF Cottesmore. Construction began before the Second Small Disagreement in 1936 and it was completed by 1938. It was mostly used for training purposes and that continued to be the case throughout the disagreement until 1943, at which point the United States Army Air Force took over. They had delivered to the site 32 Horsa gliders, something that I wasn't familiar with, but these sound absolutely terrifying. Basically, it was a glider, but on a huge scale. They could transport 30 troops, and they'd be towed into the sky by another aircraft, where they'd then be released so that the troops could be deployed. A key area of operation was the Battle of Normandy, which saw 250 gliders deliver troops and supplies to the front line. During the third small, now upgraded to medium cold disagreement in the late 1950s, RAF Cottesmore would become home to a squadron of specialist aircraft known as the V-bombers. Both the Victor and Vulcan aircraft were based here and it was their job to drop our nuclear weapons when required to do so, and in between practicing quick reaction alerts, new pilots would be trained on how to fly the V-bombers. Whilst a lot of the original airfield still remains, it's now in use by the British Army and is more commonly referred to as Kendry Barracks. Our final destination for today is the town of Stretton, because we had to end somewhere. In the days of my guidebook, Stretton had a population of only 170, and one source suggests that the name Stretton is supposed to mean settlement on a Roman road in Old English. Today, the A1 runs right through the middle of Stretton, which indeed used to be a Roman road, although I imagine back then it was a lot quieter. My Michelin guidebook doesn't have any suggestions for sightseeing, but it does mention an authorised Michelin dealer and workshop known as Ramjam Garage. In those days, this car garage would have specialised in working on Bell-sized motor cars, although not for long because Bell-size ceased manufacturing in 1925. The name Ramjam most likely comes from the now demolished pub or inn that was situated next door, and whilst the original vehicle workshop has also been demolished, in its place there's now Ramjam Service Station, keeping the Ramjam name alive. And there we are then, guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there's of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Till then, take care, bye bye.